Oh, history. I have questions and concerns about our relationship with history. Who taught us our history? What ears were we hearing those lessons with? What do we remember about those lessons of our history? And when we recall that history now, what are we doing with it? For what purpose? In this segment, we consider white relationship with our history here in the United States. If each of us insists on turning our backs on slavery and segregation, we hope to eventually find ourselves in a time when the horrors are all but forgotten. Sometimes, however, people will force you to look back. Here is how to characterize the Civil War. Oh, this one's a choose your own adventure. Option A. It wasn't even about slavery. It was about states' rights. Option B. Of course it was about slavery, and many white people died fighting to stop it. Occasionally, other people will claim that colonization and slavery still impact certain communities today. Prepare your loved ones for this by explaining that the ugly parts of history they may have heard about really weren't that bad. Acknowledge that some white people did do some horrible things. It would sound unrealistic if we didn't admit to a little bit. But the important thing to remember is that it was a long time ago. And we are beyond all of that now. Yes. Now, I've been studying. Really, I have. But there's something that's really confusing to me. Well, sometimes we make it sound like slavery was rampant back then. Every white person had one. It was the thing to do, meaning that we shouldn't think poorly of white people who were slave owners. Then, at other times, we make it sound like very few white people actually own slaves. It's all very confusing. Oh, you're worried about truth. A consistent message isn't even necessary. All we have to do is make sure there's enough alternate stories out there so that each white person can choose something a little more comforting to believe. Oh God. Hi sir, yes. I have another question. This idea of white people who enslaved other people being a product of a different time. Can you explain that to me? It's a hollow defense. Was morality different back then? Were people fundamentally different back then? I'm really supposed to picture all those white people looking down at the people they put in chains saying, yeah, that's a good idea, because no one told them any different? It's like we're trying to tell ourselves that our ancestors get a pass as if they were ignorant little children. Okay, do we actually believe it, or is this just something that we say to each other? I'm sorry, what? My question limit has been reached? All right, well, even if you're not quite ready to accept that we white people here in the United States have a relationship with our history that is as dysfunctional as I am claiming here, I suspect you might be willing to concede that, well, you know that expression that history is written by the victors? I suspect you might be willing to concede that the history of the early days of this young country was written by the people in power, white people, and that perhaps we would do well for ourselves by exposing ourselves to a little extra history and rounding out our understanding of the history of the United States of America. That, I don't think, is far out. I don't think that is a very radical idea. And if you are indeed willing to take on that homework, I have some suggestions. One is Stamped from the Beginning by Dr. Ibram Kendi. The 1619 Project by Nikole Hannah-Jones. An Indigenous Peoples History of the United States, which I have on Kindle, but I do not have a physical copy of right now. And while you might not have thought of this as a historical book per se, if you saw it on a bookshelf at a store, I think The New Jim Crow, Mass Incarceration in the Age of Colorblindness, also would have something great to offer your understanding of the history of the United States.